Hello and welcome once again to White Lotus of Light conversational series. And I am absolutely ecstatic to have Walter Bosley on the channel. Once again, Walter, thank you so much for coming. Walter is an author, a researcher. He spent 20 years in the U.S. national security field, and he spent the last 20 plus years as a publisher and author of, gosh, how many books you got out now, Walter?
Oh boy, it's almost 20, and that includes the fiction that I've published, mostly nonfiction.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, Walter's work is just absolutely extraordinary, and we're going to get into some of that today. And so, before we launch into it, Walter, how are you doing today? You doing well?
Good, good. We're everybody is experiencing this heat wave, right, from east to west, north to south. So, dealing with that. But hey, it's summertime, so
yeah. I think we all need to just get rid of industrial society because the summer's hot. I'm just kidding. little global warming joke there. Walter, I'm gonna call this conversation 2023, the year of the UFO, because I had you on around this time of year, a couple months later, in 2022, and what we were talking about then was still to some degree kind of on the fringes, and now, especially if you go on, it might be algorithm driven, I don't know, but if I go on Bing and I use Bing, or I use the whatever Microsoft Edge, I guess they call it now, I use that as a secondary screen for a specific stock chart or crypto chart. But when you load it up, it has all this news, and every day it's just one UFO story after another, after another, after another. And the thing is the media is going crazy. Like, it's everything from Chuck Schumer came out with a literal bill on the floor of Congress, or Gorsh is testifying from Congress, or stuff that's, very grounded in reality, to the mainstream media is now running stories like, oh, a UFO crashed in, Vegas or something, and there was aliens, like 8-foot tall lizard aliens that came out of it, and blah, blah, blah. Just, they're letting any nonsense story get on there. UFO, UFO, UFO.
Yeah.
And the backdrop to all of this is, and we're going to get way into the details here, is we got the U.S. election coming in 2024. And then we also have, this extreme geopolitical tension between Russia and China and the U.S., or the greater West, whatever. There's even odd things going on in Israel right now, obviously the war in Ukraine. I mean, there's tremendous geopolitical tension that I think it's safe to say we haven't seen this since World War I, meaning the level of complexity, right? And then even an additional higher layer of that, in the sense of it's underway and unstoppable at this point, is this financial reset that, where they're wanting to move to this so-called quantum financial system and crypto and blockchain. And so, at the beginning of this year, we had this Flap, and I'm going to get to that in a second, the whole Northcom combatant commander coming out. But one of the things that I know you and I agree with on a lot is that when it comes to UFOs, there's a few different theories on where do they come from, right? There's the classic, it's ET, right? There's also people who say that they're actually just interdimensional beings. Like, a number of people who are especially like occultists or esotericists say, nah, they're not from another planet. They're just, angels or demons or Ashuras or whatever term you want to use. They're other vibratory beings who vibrate into our dimension. And then there's the theory that I think you and I have as not the sole explanation, but one of the primary explanations being that 90 to 95% of the craft we see in a legitimate, not a UFO crash in my backyard in Vegas and nobody else saw it thing, but an actual legitimate sightings, that it's really humans. It's humans flying in hidden technology. And sort of the three theories on that, and then we'll go into each one, are it's antediluvian technology that's been reconstituted, the Navamsa thread, which we'll get into here in a minute, Atlantean technology, Emperor Brahma technology, some ancient human technology from a prior advanced civilization.
Mm-hmm.
There's the theory that it's reversed engineered craft. And
Mm-hmm.
there's even the kind of nutty, but I think there is some legs to it, this theory that it was channeled by the Thule Society and Maria Orsic and the Vril Society, that it was, you know, comes from an interdimensional or demonic or whatever source. And so let's just jump right into it. What are your thoughts on the origins of where this technology that is suddenly dominating the news cycle, where it comes from, and what the implications are for our country and the planet?
I think all the usual answers, possibilities for sources, I think they're all accurate. What does that mean? As you said, in the legitimate UFO reports, you know, let's face it, not all UFO reports people make are legitimate. There's people making stuff up because they want to be part of the fun. They, you know, I saw one too, you know. So you got to weed through that. And you got people that literally are seeing, obviously, aircraft, you know, at their nearest airport or something, or helicopter, or whatever, or you name it. Legitimate UFO cases. Yeah, I think 90% of that, of the legitimate ones, are human technology of a classified order, which, you know, in my opinion, the number I've thrown out there is 10%, then includes all these other possibilities. And that I totally think, I should say, I'm on board with the existence of extraterrestrials. To me, it would be illogical and kind of silly to assume that, you know, until we see extraterrestrials, you know, I'm not going to say they exist. I just, you know, I think, of course, they're out there, and we're talking intelligent beings, you know, with a technology. But I also think the whole interdimensional visitors thing is part of the mix. I also think that spiritual or demonic type entities are a real thing.
Yes.
And now interdimensional would include people traversing time and space, you know, as well as time as well as space.
Mm.
So what that requires is carefully looking at each case to, you know, do one's best to try to determine which category it fits in. But I think there's credibility to the idea of all these.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I actually am even more conservative than you. I think that about 95% are human based.
Uh-huh.
I do believe with as certain as we can be around these unknown speculative matters, you know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, we are speculating, but
Yeah.
I'm utterly convinced that humans have what I refer to as ultra tech, meaning
Mm-hmm.
anti-gravity, free energy, and
Sure.
probably plasma weapons, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, perhaps tractor beams, things along those lines. I think that
Mm-hmm.
there's a level of technology that is held in these special access programs, both within the United States aerospace defense contractors, but I also think, of course, the Nazi International, which I think ties into your Navamsa thread, which we'll get into here in a minute.
Sure.
And I think that there may be other ultra wealthy elites that have their own programs going. I think, you know, China very likely and Russia very likely have their own programs going. The EU may have a program going. I think that there's you know, a number, there's at least two. There's at least the United States and this Nazi International group, as Dr. Farrell refers to them. But I think that that's very conservative. Israel may have a program as well. That's another country that I could see having that. India, perhaps even. Any country that has an overt rocket-based space program,
Yeah.
I think you got to wonder if they're not just playing along with the dog and pony show of, oh yeah, we're sending up some rockets, and meanwhile they're really funding this other research.
Well,
Go.
and then you have to consider the nations that would have some type of agreement with those nations that have an overt program, so that these smaller nations don't need their own program. I could see, you mentioned Israel. I could see Israel having their personnel, piggybacking on the mission of one of the larger countries that has this big program that they quite frankly couldn't afford.
Right.
So in India, you mentioned India, they have their own overt space program. So, what are they doing on the secret level? What have they discovered in their own backyard as regards knowledge of
Yeah.
what the ancients might have been doing in this regard?
Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. And so I want to delve into one of the areas where we also agree is that I think a significant amount of this technology is human in origin. Both we can delve into this one a little bit later, but both the space cousins, right? The Dr.
Yeah.
Cosmic
Mm-hmm.
war, ancient cosmic war thing where humans are to some degree extraterrestrial genetically, and that there's something very, very, very similar to us, perhaps as close as I wonder, like with this other group, like could we breed with them? Could we have viable offspring, or would we have mules, or would nothing would happen? Like I think we could be close enough to at least have mules, meaning when you breed a horse and a donkey, you get a mule, but then they're sterile. So if you want more mules, you got to breed horses and donkeys. Enough to have it. Go ahead.
I don't know why that there aren't humans exactly like us whom we could easily breed with, because they and we are all part of the same, specific human species, or whatever however you need to specify it. This idea that scientists tell us that, oh, well, that couldn't possibly be because humans like us have to have started on this planet. We haven't found anywhere else yet, which makes me laugh, because as far as we know, we've only been to the moon and look closely at Mars. And I've said this for a long time. Until our scientists have gone to every habitable planet in the universe and found not one single human being that originated anywhere else, only then can they say it's impossible. I think it's kind of laughable when the very, very extremely limited extent to which we are familiar with overt science, and I'd venture to say much of secret science too, the extreme limit that we are at with what we know about the universe and off this planet. I think it's hilarious to hear any scientist with any confidence saying what is and isn't throughout space and on other worlds. These guys should be saying, hey, we're all infants in human, with our knowledge, and until we venture out with manned space travel, until we venture out into these other worlds, we can't answer questions about what's off this planet for certain. From this perspective, from sitting in the laboratory armchair, so to speak, on Earth, it's just silly. So I think one of the big secrets is that there are human beings exactly like us out there, and I part of that is I think they found it. They know exactly what DNA to look for. This is why the push on, hey, 23andMe and all this other stuff, get as many people as possible, because somewhere in that, some people say it's the junk DNA, but somewhere in there, there's a DNA marker that they know is off planet, extraterrestrial origin. And I think by now, every single one of us, or into the 90 percentile of us, have some degree of that marker, of that genetic marker. But the point is, I think the people, in authority who have this information, I think they've known for a long time that humans from other worlds have come here over the ages and settled in here and have been able to blend with us because they are us, essentially. You know, think about the days of the during the era of discovery, or the Renaissance, and during the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, when allegedly, most people didn't know about the New World, essentially the Americas, North and South America, right? But there were people here, human beings here. Okay, there were subtle racial differences, but they're still human beings that we can intermarry and stuff like that. And back then, it was just people on different continents, right? Well, I think if you put that to the macro, it's going to be the same thing as then. There's just people on different planets, people in different star systems, but they are people just like us.
Yeah.
I don't think that they want us to know that for some reason. They're keeping that from us. And I think one of the obvious reasons is the fact that they can come here and blend, and the likelihood that they have and that they are. And we have to include in that the possibility that some of us are more aware of the connection to them than others. I could see where, certainly our government would want to keep an eye on people who were aware of that. Okay, now when I say aware, my criteria for aware isn't just the quaint thing you kind of see in the New Agey community, where it's like, oh, I sense that I am one of the. No. I'm talking about people that know for a fact, about the humans off world, and it has been demonstrated to them in a material, convincing manner, that that we are of this. I suspect that there are those among us who have that knowledge, and they're watched closely, or close enough, and people say, well, why don't they just come out and confess that and tell the world? Well, we have to consider there might be something about that knowledge that includes a very compelling reason for not revealing it.
Yeah.
Because clearly the open disclosure hasn't happened. Right. And I've said for a while that this whole thing about disclosure, all these people squawking and stomping their feet and, want the government to reveal it. Well, I think the beings that they want disclosed, I think they themselves are controlling disclosure. I think they're the ones saying, no, you won't disclose us. We don't want to be disclosed. And whether it's a treaty or some type of understanding, there is some type of compelling consequence that keeps this undisclosed. So, the people that want ET disclosed, you're, as Sala said in Raiders of the Lost Ark, they're digging in the wrong place when they're demanding the government to tell them. The government, for a variety of reasons, is not going to tell them. But maybe they ought to start demanding it of the so-called ETs.
Interesting. Wow.
Why? Because think about it. They could reveal themselves anytime they wanted to. They could ignore, particularly if they're technologically, more advanced than we are, they could ignore our governments. They could just appear in the skies all over the cities of the world and say, hey, we're here. Deal with us. We don't care that the religious people might flip out. We don't care what it'll do to, your political machinations, your stratego board of who's in power. We don't care what this will do to your industry. As a matter of fact, we're going to bring you some technology that's going to do wonders for your industry. But, they could do it, but they're not.
Interesting. That's so interesting. Gosh, there's so many threads there. I just want to point out that what do you think? And I'm going. We have these bullet points, and we're already wandering way off it. But I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. Walter and I had a pretty lengthy discussion beforehand and talked about our cool woo woo shit, and now we're immediately going off the trail.
Yeah,
bushwhacking out here. So, some people say that George Lucas was an insider or was leaked some information. Now you'll notice in Star Wars there's an a galactic civilization that has features at the center, humans. there are other species,
Yes.
but humans
Yes.
are the center of it and the source of power and kind of the ultimate arbiters.
Right.
It would be interesting. Your theory, in a way, dovetails into what if George Lucas was leaking the model of how our galaxy really works, and for whatever reason, the humans who are off planet, like you say, don't want that revealed. What do you think about that? Because I believe that, yes, there's something like us off there. That's wild to me that you're saying that they're exactly like us, because then
I think it's,
we terraform, or does oxygen just like are we just automatically, like, is there something about us that makes us compatible with a variety of planets as long as there's oxygen?
Why does it have to be a variety of planets? It can be, there could be countless Earths out there. If our planet formed, that's evidence that this forms. Okay, this kind of planet forms. There's no way this is the only one that formed like this. So there could be countless planets exactly like ours.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because like the Hermetic principle, which you kind of already alluded to with the continents theory, as above, so below, right, as that being a principle of the universe, like that does imply exactly what you say. Some people talk about something called a morphogenic field, which says more or less that once something comes into existence in the universe, it's a template that can be repeated and repeated. And evidence of this on Earth is this, I forget what it's called, carcinogenesis or something, but where things that aren't crabs turn into something that looks very much like a crab. That it's happened like 4 different times evolutionarily. I mean, I don't even know what I think about that anymore. I'm open to that. Evolution works very differently than we think, but
sure,
like it's still like it's worth looking at. Or another example, again using evolution, regardless of what people think about that, you have whales and dolphins and so forth. They went up out of the ocean, they went onto land, they were land mammals, and then they went back to the ocean. What do they look a lot like? The things that stayed in the ocean, the fish. Like they end up resembling that very closely, even though they're a very different being. Their behavior is different, but they end up resembling it. So you're positing then that there's a variety of things that are Earth-like out there, to where we as humans could go to these Earth-like planets and would be able to successfully like digest plant material and animal material that's there, and that there would be an oxygen-rich atmosphere. Wow, that's so
cool. Why not? And to me, this is not mind-blowing, because we know for a fact we exist. Our Earth exists.
Oh, it makes sense.
That right there is the glaring evidence. I mean, what blows my mind is our existence isn't enough, and really, this is all the result of Western civilization conditioning. I'm not one of those that bashes Western civilization. Western civilization is generally a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, but one of the things we do, I think that's a mistake, is the arrogance, of our knowledge base, and the assumptions and presumptions. Now, a lot of that you can blame on the change in the Royal Society in England, the Royal Societies in 1830. Now, up until 1830, the philosopher scientists, the guys who would totally understand what we're talking about, this concept, and be okay with it, they were the ones, by gosh, that founded the sciences. They were the ones that founded the Royal Societies. But what happened was, by 1830, the bean counters, the materialists, who a lot of them just hated the philosopher scientists, they finally outnumbered the philosopher scientists, essentially, and kind of voted or just took over the Royal Societies. Now, why is this important? Because where the Royal Societies went, science in Western civilization followed. That was really the beginning of our bean counting materialists telling us, no, let us tell you what's out there and what's here, because we're the specialists. This was also around the time that, and think about it, in the big picture of history, 1830 is not that long ago. That's why so many people have this lazy dependence upon the specialists. Don't get me wrong. having a specialty has forwarded medical science in particular to, I went through cancer a few years ago. It was specialists that saved my life. I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater at all, but what I'm saying is the focus on the specialist has lent to this very limited view and this intellectual laziness on the common man. Okay.
Absolutely.
Because it's, there's a specialist. Let the specialist tell us how it is. And that's where we get, and that's ignorant. That's where we get this ignorance and this arrogant assumption that, oh, no. We can just assume there's nothing like us out there.
Yeah. That's so interesting because I see that, and we talked about this off camera, and for viewers of this channel, like, you can, if you came here for Walter, if you want to go deeper on this, you can look up my Luciferians versus Malachian Shadow War series, but I sort of briefed Walter on this a bit, this theory that there's the kind of Florentine, Cosimo Medici, Renaissance, Enlightenment, Scottish Enlightenment founding the Americas that I call a Luciferian consciousness, which is this sort of capitalist, enlightened self-interest, advancement of arts and sciences. It's not a zero-sum game. There's a spiritual component to things. Humans are made in the image of God versus this Malachian Venetian zero-sum game, or dead materialism, right? Which you talked about is like a big hallmark. They have a real hive mind mentality. They have a real top-down structure. I'm of the opinion that the Malachians seeded and created, the Venetians created the British Empire. It's when the Venetians liquidate their assets after the War of the League of Cambrai and they move up to Amsterdam and London that really that's the moment. And like, Shakespeare actually kind of tried to warn us about this, and so did some of the English, intelligentsia of that era were trying, but it was very dangerous, and they knew it was lethally dangerous to bring this up, regardless of who you think Shakespeare is. Francis Bacon, call it whoever, it doesn't matter.
I'm in the 7th Earl of Oxford camp.
Oh, well, okay, fair enough, right? I like that. But, whoever you think Shakespeare is, there was an intelligentsia that were kind of like England firsters, if you will, of their era.
Well, yeah, and you have to make a distinction in the British Empire. There's the people, and then there's the apparatus that really is created and runs the British Empire. The people, they became enlightened. Hey, our rulers, there's something going on here. They've got, their hands are into something they're not telling us. So, for instance, when you hear me be critical of the Brits and the British, I'm talking about the those in charge over there, those who would have been involved in this. And I agree with you, this originally Venetian scheme. I'm not talking about the people, because in my Napoleon research, I learned that the British aristocracy and the ones running the show, they were, I think, mortified that the people weren't really so anti-Napoleon as they were, for example. And that's why they had to do this character assassination job on him. And it was a character assassination of Napoleon that lasted for, 200 years. And still goes on, with people that just don't want to let it go. So yeah, one of the reasons why Napoleon, I like to say the Bonaparte captive, for reasons, if you read my book, one of the reasons why they at the last minute decided to take him to St. Helena, the island, the rock where was because they were afraid that if they brought him to England, the people would love the guy and he would charm them, and they would get ideas like during the French Revolution. And there's the officials, the elites, the aristocracy that was guarding their empire. So anyway, I just think that's an important distinction to make when discussing the British Empire. And
I agree. And where I was going to go with that point is specialization. Specialization is very close to the intelligence, which comes from the Council of Ten, right? Council of Ten and the Jesuits, right?
Yeah.
Compartmentalization.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head about that. The reason the bean counters really hate the philosopher scientist is because the philosopher scientist is a comprehensive scientist. He or she looks at everything and is able to get the big picture. And the big picture is what the bean counters, the compartmentalizers, don't want anyone to have. That's why they really disliked and discouraged the philosopher science focus. It's no, you stay in your lane, and this is, don't talk to each other.
And I don't even think
it was
I think it's
what's that?
I don't even think it's the bean counters. I think it's the people up above who are themselves generalists.
Yes.
They understand the big picture, and they empowered the bean counters to have the control in order to compartmentalize. That's what I think.
But there is human individual accountability. Okay. At some point in every human being's life, I believe this, they reach that point of personal enlightenment where they know it should be practicing a bit of independence from what the puppet master, and if you're just going to go along with it, this is why careerism is pushed, particularly in academia. They've got these people locked into, careerism. And so therefore they're going to stay in their lane, and they're going to, they want to earn their tenure, and they want to keep it. They, look at the college professors. What do? They tend to write a book, right? And then a lot of times that book is the main textbook, right? Yeah. They don't want science to change during their career, because then they either have to do the work to update their book, or their book becomes obsolete. And this is just one of the many reasons why careerism takes root. And shame on the scientist who just goes along to get along. Because absolutely. At some point it should have been about the truth.
Absolutely. I couldn't possibly agree more. I was just pointing out that there's a reason that careerism and anti-generalist, anti-comprehensive, holistic, anti-holistic is probably the best way of describing it. Worldviews, especially in science, were rooted out because the controllers, right, which I would say the Venetians, the Moluccans, whatever you want to call them, the people who have been dominating this planet for the past 6,000 years with mostly like banking shell games, they wanted the benefits of technology and the advancement of science with as much total control as they could possibly have.
Of course. That's
why they moved to that bean counter model, as you say. And yes, the bean counters have responsibility. My guess would be, my experiences meeting bean counters is they're very jealous of those of us who have holistic thinking, because their mind just doesn't work that way, and they don't like it. They're very good at one little deductive thinking, reasoning.
They're pedantic. They're pedantic, and you look at the social politics. That's really what was going on back in the Royal Society, like I was talking about. A lot of them hated those philosopher scientist guys. They just hated them, and that's because they weren't on their level.
Right, exactly. It's that inductive thinking is part of it. Inductive thinking, and then being able to have an inductive leap of logic, and then reverse engineering.
Human beings have a problem that they kind of have a propensity to turn into a-holes when groupthink takes over, when team think takes over. Okay. I like to, for instance, let's use a fun pop culture example, to delineate what I'm talking about here. You've got Avengers versus X-Men, and I'm not a Marvel Comics fanatic guy. This is just a good example. Okay. I prefer, and I think what's better for, human civilization is the Avengers model as opposed to the X-Men model. Why do I say that? The X-Men tend to generally, they all are in the one place, and a lot of them live in the X-Men house, right? And they all wear the same uniform, and they don't do anything. It's all about the team 24/7, the collective. Whereas the Avengers, they're a group of heroes that are off doing their own things, okay, independent characters, and they come together when it's necessary. And they do they can be team players. Hey, it's necessary to pull the team together. Let's do the thing. Once the problem is solved, hey, see you later. Okay, that's healthier. Why? Because these individuals are getting a balance of being individuals, pursuing the very look. We wouldn't exist physically as individual samples of, if the individual experience wasn't important. Okay.
Yeah.
This is why, one of the many reasons why I am opposed to the obsession with the collective
Yeah.
thinking.
Collective.
You know, and the idea that the human consciousness and soul is more advanced the more they become absorbed into a collective. Are you kidding me? No, no, no. It's the opposite, and that's the dirty secret that collectivist masters don't want you to know. Is no, the more advanced you are consciously and spiritually and all that, is the more of an individual you become. Why is individuation important in that? Because the lessons you need to learn for having compassion for other human beings and all this stuff, the more you can master having compassion and understanding that as you're an individual, that requires more advancement than just being in a collective. Is easy and it's lazy.
Yes.
It's easy and it's lazy. And anybody who tells you otherwise, they're flat out misguided, mistaken, wrong. Okay. Wow. And I know there's a bunch of collectivists out there in Woo land right now that are just, venom is being spewed my way. I generally don't care. Anyway,
yeah.
How did we get there?
Yeah, well,
I went off on one of my Walter Bosley things.
We were talking, Walter, we were talking about the Royal Society and
yes,
the top down.
Oh yeah. And the bean counters, they're the collective types. It's like, oh, we got to be accepted by our little social group. You know, it's again, you're right. Thank you. It brings it back to the team think. Human beings, when they get into team think, they get dumber.
Yep.
They really don't think. This is why the older I've gotten, the more I've gone through life, I say, I don't like people very much, but I like persons. I like persons. I like individuals. But when they become people, that's when the a-hole behavior really tends to come out. And we're seeing that in political stuff going on right now, without getting too deep into that. You know, just this rah-rah stuff, whether you're left or right, we're seeing a lot of dumb team rah-rah. And here's the thing, that's ultimately dangerous.
Yep. Because
when the left was doing it, you had buildings being burned down and all sorts of destruction. And you know, when now we're seeing examples of the right falling into groupthink and get your pitchforks and torches out. And I'll tell you, when human beings do that, when they become that angry mob in a Frankenstein movie, that's when they start doing wrong things.
Atrocities, yeah. And it doesn't matter which side of the spectrum it comes out.
That's right. You see it on both.
I'm actually concerned about even though I loosely agree with the right now, because they at least somewhat defend the Bill of Rights, which I think is, you know, foundational.
Oh, I'm right of center. I mean,
yeah, but I do work.
I'm generally a conservative guy.
I guess me as well nowadays, just because like the other alternative is wholesale change and
that's
like
right.
nonsense transhumanist like nightmare dystopia, you know, great reset stuff, the collectivism, you know. But I do have a little, and then I want to get back on the UFO topic. I do have a little bit of a fear about.
Well, I'm going to tie this into the UFO topic, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I do have a little bit of fear that there could be a right-wing reactionary backlash that would be hijacked the same way these leftist movements that were like, you know, exactly. I broadly agree with like environmentalism, right? Like let's protect species, habitat, and clean up pollution. But I'm adamantly opposed to this CO2, you know, deindustrialization nonsense, right? Yeah. But that's an example of how something that's inherently like a pretty good movement got hijacked by this collectivist nonsense. And if people on the right think that that can't happen to their side, they're woefully mistaken. Because World War II showed us how the extremes of the right and the left can both yield generally the same result, which is a lot of people getting killed by that pitchfork and torches mob that you just described. And so how can you tie this into UFOs, Walter, so we can get back on the track? I love
look at the UFO community right now and how it's divided. The UFO community is divided into there is an angry mob in the UFO community, and that's the people who have mostly emerged since 2017 with this BS that the New York Times article changed the narrative and revealed anything. No, it did not. It was BS. That it emerged along the same lines when TTSA first came out and all those CIA guys and Lou Elizondo emerged. And what have we learned since then? Okay, Lou ain't what everybody thought Lou was. But here's the thing. You had these rabid fanboys, okay, and they're still out there. I hear that UFO Twitter, they're still out there and stuff, but I mean they get vicious and nasty if you say Lou ain't nothing. Well, hey guys, Lou Elizondo ain't nothing. He didn't reveal a danged thing. Okay, sorry, farce, fraud. He was there for a different reason than you think. Okay, and I remember Daniel List and I, as far as I know, we were the first in the community to publicly, from the beginning, from the day of the TTSA press conference, right, that introduced our world to Lou. Daniel and I were the first two to say, this is all an operation. This is a perception management thing going on here. These guys are still intelligence community assets, and nobody listened. And then more people started seeing that and saying that. Well, I said it back then and I'm saying it now. And the thing is, they act like an angry, vicious mob, doxing people, threatening people, being this blind faith. There's people, I gave up on Twitter a while back, but I remember during the early times of this, there's one particular guy that just constantly is in love with Lou, and if you said anything, he would, within 5 to 10 minutes, if you said anything negative or critical of Lou, within 5 to 10 minutes, this whiner would go to a certain select other group of Lou fanatics, and they all know who they are, and suddenly you'd find yourself being ratioed by these fanatical people, and the disclosure. The ET fanatics are the same way. There's people that are that way in support of Jeremy Corbell, who, in my opinion, is nothing but a carnival barker. Who's he's a self-promoter, folks. That's what's going on with Jeremy Corbell, and shame on George Knapp for teaming up with him. That guy, if he, whatever credibility he had, got flushed down the toilet. With and Lazar, I mean, Bob Lazar, a guy who it was proven that he was, a fraud 20 something years ago. And now he's out here being taken seriously by what? By a bunch of noobs, mostly, who don't know the history of all this, don't care to know the history. They believe it. That's what they want to push. I think they're being guided unwittingly to keep pushing this. That's all part of a perception management thing. And and there's others that have there. There were Corey Good didn't need a bunch of fanatic fanboys, even though he had them, because he handled all the vicious attacks himself directly. But we talked about Greer. Greer has his true believers. He's another one that, wow. But that's the thing. In the UFO community, we have these fanboys and fangirls of certain people, and they've escalated in their hostilities towards people who question their idols and heroes. You can't question these people. Now, what I see in that, after being 20 years in the national security, specifically the intelligence community, what I see in that is the hand of intelligence agency influence and manipulation and nudging. Okay, because that's a discussion we could talk for 3 hours on, but that's what I see going on there. They're fanning the flames of all this hostility to distract us
and getting people fighting. And I have a tidbit. So 2 people I know, someone I love dearly. A shout out to you. You know who you are if you listen to the show, and I'll tell you to listen to it. Although I'm not sure how you're going to feel about Walter Trant there. And by the way, I love Walter's work, and I think we largely agree on a lot of this stuff, but I don't necessarily co-sign on Walter's rant there, just because in particular there's someone I dearly love, and he actually knows Lou, and he's not certain, even knowing that person personally, he's seen both a good side and has questions, right? I also
Sure.
know someone now, totally separate from that, who was on the Nimitz and came on not long after the Tic Tac, and guess what? Blink 182 and Tom DeLonge, I think this might be the first time this has ever come out. They were on the Nimitz either directly before or directly after the Tic Tac incident, long before Tom DeLonge, before it came out.
Yeah.
About the Tic
Well,
Tac. No. But just
right.
think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
They were on the Nimitz, and this person said, when the celebrities come, right? Because they're in San Diego and they just flew it from LA. When the celebrities came, Blink 182 came. They meet all the brass, then they meet all the pilots, and then maybe they do photo ops with the guys who are scrubbing the below decks four layers down. But they met all the pilots, they met all the brass. Isn't that interesting? The timing of that is very curious. And as far as I know, nobody knows what I just said in the UFO community, that there's that very early link between Tom DeLonge and the Nimitz.
Sure.
Was their lead story for the whole TTSA. And that's someone I know who was on that ship, a Navy.
Well, another little tidbit too is years ago, the main pilots, Fravor and the female pilot, and another one, the main three, maybe four, they were featured on a cable series called Carrier, which was a documentary series about life on an aircraft carrier. And they were the featured pilots. And then subsequently, well, they're the witnesses to this Tic Tac thing. And, why is that curious? Well, if you're good soldiers and you play along, you get selected for certain things. So I find that interesting, what you're saying. From my perspective, that makes the whole thing even fishier. That it was, a big put up thing. And
there's even some tech stuff, which I can't go into because that person realized that maybe they weren't supposed to tell me. There's certain tech things, there's holes in that story. Let's just say I can't go into it because that person.
Holes in what story? That it was otherworldly or that it was our tech?
Some of the I have to be careful what I say here, Walter. Hopefully this person isn't going to be upset with me, but the way the story is being told does not match
what happened
with instrumentation.
Okay.
Maybe you and I can talk about that offline. I need to be careful because that person, realized after they told me that perhaps that was letting a cat out of a bag.
Now remember, let's step back and remember that could be true. Maybe these things were doing something even more extraordinary than we've been told. That in itself, in no way is proof positive that this was not our technology being tested.
Absolutely.
And that's my big point to people. I'm not saying the Tic Tac event didn't happen.
Right.
I'm not saying that, they didn't see something that was like, holy smokes, what was that? I'm saying they were in a known channel out in the Pacific where advanced secret technology is tested regularly, well known. They weren't just, a lot of people initially, I remember, thought that this happened right there. You could be standing in downtown San Diego on the Coronado Bridge and see this going on. No. They were miles out to sea, and they were south enough that they were more parallel with Baja California than they were San Diego, and they were in a channel where those islands are controlled. There's one or two of the channel islands in California that civilians can't go on without permission because they are controlled and owned by the U.S. Navy and other aerospace organizations and test things.
Have you ever heard, Walter, this is related, and I love that we're just letting things arise organically rather than I don't think we've almost hit a single one, but that's fine. We'll just do it in a future.
We still got time. Go ahead.
Someone even showed me like pictures, and again, this is someone else who, like, I've recently kind of connected in with, I don't know, the NatSec people. Just have, I honestly wonder if my shows somehow didn't attract these people in. But someone showed me a picture of what looked like Roman columns that apparently is near San Diego that then leads into the continental shelf, meaning that there's a tunnel that goes question mark under perhaps San Diego, but near the continental shelf off the coast of San Diego, there's these Romanesque columns and a tunnel that like subs could go into, or the UFOs that what is it, USO, undersea. I refuse to use UAP, but the underwater craft could go in and out of that, and that you know, what's odd about it is that why, let's say it's modern building, why would you build Romanesque columns?
Well, if the Romanesque column, have you seen photos or anything of these?
They showed me, I think it was a sonar picture of it, but it didn't look like what they said, and they said they knew people who had seen it directly.
Okay, see, that's the, and you know, you can't say, oh, those people are lying, but what you can do is say, hey, within our context here, we just can't accept, and that's another problem with the whole UFO community is there's a lot of people out there that just expect you to accept people's testimony because, you know, they want to believe people aren't lying and stuff. But folks, there's just enough people out there who lie that there's a reason why we've reached a point where we just can't accept, well, I know a guy who knows somebody who, sorry, that's great for talking around the water cooler or the campfire, but when we're trying to determine and trying to find, you know, better evidence, we just have to kind of, okay, we'll note that, but we can't hang anything. I just was wondering
if you had heard anything about that.
Here's what I've heard. Okay, I haven't heard about the columns, but I have heard for years that's been going around that there's some type of what do you call it? Subaquatic cavern system that the openings are, I've heard around San Clemente, which is just a little ways north. It's north of Camp Pendleton. And I've heard from there, you know, San Clemente and maybe where Pendleton is. When I was an agent, I did learn of a story about an individual who, it came up in my background info. I was tipped off because we'll just say someone I know personally was taking some photos from their sailboat down off of San Clemente. And they were taking photos of, that camera was aimed at a specific spot on the coast that got them in trouble. The Navy went to the FBI, and the FBI had a little talk with said person, wondering just what they were going to do with these photographs. Now, that could have been, they was on a surface vessel, you know, that could have been, you know, anything, you know, up on the coastline or whatever. But in that conversation, it was mentioned, you know, the things under the water. Now, that could be technology, but I thought it was interesting because I was familiar with, you know, this story that there is a subaquatic, you know, subsurface marine tunnel. Now, this also is mentioned in one of the famous, we had those two submarines that for years, the story was nobody knew what happened to them, that one of them is the Thresher, the other one, I can't remember the name of it. And one of the stories is that one of those submarines had actually been sent to explore those natural submarine, or maybe not natural, submarine tunnels. And they went really deep into the North American continent, like, but just under the surface, and something happened down there, and, you know, they sank, didn't return. That's lore. Okay, that's lore. But you know, there may very well be those submarine caverns. You know, I think when you look at it, when you look at the natural science and the geology of it, I think you could say, well, yeah, that's very possible. But if it is true, the U.S. Navy is guarding that, seriously guarding that, okay, because they control that area.
I may need to talk to this person to see if I need to edit what I said out. and leave in what you said because I don't know. That's another one of those ones I probably need to ask on both those things that I kind of let slip. Just people tell me sometimes.
Well,
Interesting.
let me add too. When I start talking about these things, okay, I get enthusiastic. All right.
Yeah.
And I know there's some pearl clutchers out there that, oh, you were arrogant. It's like, after I think in my head, oh, please, for God's sake, grow up, and have a sense of humor. Okay. I myself had a UFO sighting in December of 2014. I don't talk about it nearly as much as most people, even on my low level in this community, do when they have an experience. They make as much hay out of an experience like that as they can. Why don't I constantly talk about it? Because the only evidence I have for it is really weak. I had my video camera, I captured it on video, but it was one of those classic things where what me and the other witness were seeing with our eyes, the video didn't pick up. So it's useless. So that's why I don't haul out my experience, my testimony, as some grand piece of evidence, because I apply my own criteria to even my evidence. And my evidence isn't strong enough or convincing enough to be traipsing it out all the time as some example. And,
Right.
In our community, unfortunately, we have people who build careers on less. And all I'm saying is, I'm not calling everybody liars. I'm calling some people liars because there are liars.
Absolutely.
But all I'm saying is, folks, we're trying to get to the truth here. And unfortunately, it might hurt some feelings, but we have to stop making our conclusions, drawing our conclusions, founding our positions on something that's just mere testimony. Okay, we've got to start saying, that's nice, but we're going to put you over here with the testimony, and we're going to continue to move towards some other more material evidence.
Yeah,
that's all.
Well, so I want to actually try and get back into some of the stuff.
Let's do it.
we had here. So, the UFO flap earlier in this year. So, wait, do you want to touch on? You know what? I'm just going to actually refer people. If you want to know about Walter's opinion on the antediluvian attack, I did an interview with Walter where we went very deep on that, into the Navamsa thread, back to the Fourth Crusade. Which I agree, Walter and I agree that that's just this absolutely pivotal moment in Western history because of the bringing back of ancient knowledge from gosh, what was it? Was it Byzantium or Constantinople? Constantinople, yeah. It's the city, the eternal city, that's name changes every 5 years.
They essentially, in their archive, their national archive, they essentially had the same information that would have been in the Library of Alexandria, and in some cases, actual scrolls and in items from the Library of Alexandria. There were 3 or 4 such repositories back in the ancient world, and a lot of people think that the Library of Alexandria was the only one that held certain things. In some cases, yes, but what they don't realize is a lot of this was shared with these other repositories. So when in the Fourth Crusade they raided it, it was to get the same knowledge that was lost when the Library of Alexandria was finally sacked.
Yeah, and so it's really worth watching those episodes because Walter and I go pretty deep on that, especially that Fourth Crusade angle and how that antediluvian technology was likely brought forward into the Proto-German stream with the Teutonic Knights. There was 3 different groups that it seems took that opportunity to seize, and maybe even 4, to seize materials from that library during the sacking of Constantinople. And that's the Templar, I think, were there. The Venetians were there. The Teutonic Knights were there. What?
The Templars very specifically did not choose to participate in the actual invasions and stuff. What the Templars did was provide the ships to the Venetian contractors, but the Templars themselves did not want to. I don't
believe that. I believe the Templars were in there probably getting stuff for their own.
They probably certainly had agents, but officially there were no Templar units among the identified orders and units that were involved in that. Certainly their agents, and even if the other orders were there, I'm sure they had, you know, whatever those orders captured, they shared, because we know the Templars received the benefit and the captured booty from that. But it's a very interesting point. Joseph Farrell goes into this. It was a very interesting point that the Templars opted, just like in the Albigensian Crusade, where they told the Pope and the King of France, we're not going in there to kill these people.
Right.
You know, and that got them targeted.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm of the opinion, and I'll just state my own personal opinion, and I don't have evidence to back this up. To your earlier point, I strongly believe that the Templar, perhaps working with other groups, hustled some information out of there. The fourth group I was going to mention is the group that ended up, it seems, moving to Greece, and then eventually brought the copy of the Hermetica to Cosimo Medici. And I forget the name of the... there was a Greek they were Greek in character, but they like had agents or were within Constantinople, and they brought a copy of the Hermetica to Cosimo Medici, and that was the fourth group I was going to mention. Anyways, Walter and I go into that in a lot more detail in that previous thing, and so rather than spending time on that, let's hit some fresh stuff today. Real quick, Walter, do you mind if we take a quick break?
No, not at all.
Break. Okay, perfect. I'm just going to pause it here.